NASCAR and cheating go together like rain delays in NASCAR. You don't really want them together, but they're somehow magnetized to each other. Some of NASCAR's greatest drivers and owners from the early days have built their entire legacies on cheating, or as they would like to call it, innovations. But sometimes NASCAR has fought back against cheating, and the consequences have been severe, sometimes even deadly. The most successful team for most of NASCAR's history was Petty Enterprises. And while most of that success could be attributed to Richard and his team treating NASCAR more like a sport and less like a part-time redneck hobby, some success definitely came from the gray areas as well. Richard Petty once had a quote-unquote cheat neat philosophy, saying if you're going to do it in a way that nobody can find you. For years, rumors swirled of a secret room that existed in the Petty shop that only a select few individuals could enter to experiment with new findings. Not even Richard Petty was allowed to enter. Or maybe that was just the story that the guys who Richard was routinely beating made up to make themselves feel better. But regardless, one time, they pushed their luck just a little too far. And cheating neatly was the exact opposite of what they did. The day is October 9th, 1983. And Richard Petty is in the twilight of his career. Long gone are his days of winning 10 to 20 races a year, now he's lucky to get 2 or 3. And he went winless just a year earlier in 1982. Sitting at 197 career victories, the team is getting antsy to make history with number 200. Trying to score a big win at Charlotte, Petty Enterprises swings for the fence with the setup. And it works, as Richard pulls into victory lane to claim win number 198. But 4 hours later, Ken Squire announced on live television that Richard Petty's car was found to have a massively oversized engine and left side tires on the right side of the car. Under normal circumstances, most drivers would have been disqualified for such an egregious display of cheating. But with win number 200 looming on the horizon, NASCAR let Richard Petty keep the win, but at a severe cost. Petty's team was fined a massive $35,000, about $100,000 in today's money. The fine was so massive that Petty Enterprises could no longer afford to field 2 cars in the Cup Series. Richard Petty didn't want his son Kyle to lose his racing career because of his team's mistake, so Richard ended up leaving the team to sign with country music record executive Mike Curb, who he won his final 2 races for in 1984. Meanwhile, back at the Petty Enterprises shop, the team struggled throughout the 1984 season, and Kyle Petty finished a dismal 16th in points. I know, that sounds great by Kyle Petty standards, but it actually wasn't. Seeking more speed, Kyle Petty left the family organization to drive for the Wood Brothers in 1985, leaving Petty Enterprises without a driver for much of the 85 season. Although Richard returned in 86 and the team once again raced full-time, it was never the same. This single penalty effectively sank the entire organization until they finally closed up shop in 2008. NASCAR basically killed its own greatest team in the mid-80s for 1 race's worth of cheating. 6 years after Richard Petty's oversized engine penalty, another penalty would shake the NASCAR world. This one wouldn't sink an entire organization, but it would change one driver's legacy forever: Mark Martin. Mark Martin won the second race of the season at Richmond Raceway thanks to savvy pit strategy. But second place finisher Dale Earnhardt was quick to point out an illegal carburetor spacer in Martin's engine after the race, which resulted in a $40,000 fine and a 46-point penalty. Commentator Benny Parsons described the point penalty as hanging a man for shoplifting, as almost everybody knew that the modification barely gave Martin an advantage, if any at all. Martin was quick to shrug off the 46-point penalty, saying that it wouldn't matter by the season's end. At the end of the year, though, Mark Martin finished second in points to Dale Earnhardt by, well, 26 points. One of the only times in Winston Cup history where the driver with the best average finish didn't win the title. And Mark Martin would go on to be known as one of NASCAR's greatest drivers to never win a championship. Fortunately for both Mark Martin and Jack Roush, they survived this penalty and both went on to have incredibly successful careers, but it's wild to think that this penalty is part of the reason why Mark Martin has 5 runner-up points finishes and why Dale Earnhardt is one of 3 7-time NASCAR champions. It would be nearly 2 decades before NASCAR dished out another penalty that drastically affected another team or driver. In 2009, Carl Long was fined an incredible $200,000 for an oversized motor at the Sprint Showdown? My god, Carl, if you're going to cheat, do it in the Daytona 500, or Indianapolis, or Darlington, or a race that actually pays good money, not the All-Star race where only the winner gets a check. But if $100,000 was enough to cripple Petty Enterprises for years, imagine what $200,000 does to Carl Long Racing. The short answer, nothing great. Carl Long was already suspended a massive 12 races for the oversized engine, but that ultimately wouldn't matter as Long was unable to pay back his fine regardless. What happens when you don't pay your fine in NASCAR? Well, in Carl's case, he was banned from NASCAR for 8 years, until he was finally allowed to return and make sporadic starts during the 2017 season. And needless to say, his small race team wouldn't survive the winter. Eventually, Long would buy back into NASCAR ownership with MBM Motorsports, the part-time Cup and Xfinity operation, but even that team had so little money that they ran Penske's discontinued Dodge bodies and engines until 2019. 6 whole years after Dodge had officially left NASCAR. Not all cheating happens under the hood though. Sometimes it's over the radio. Since the introduction of the chase in 2004, it feels like most years there's always some kind of chicanery over the radio where teammates will intentionally hold back or find some magical way to earn the team an extra point or two. Usually these acts are ultimately harmless and have little bearing on the championship battle, but in 2013, the results were catastrophic. We've covered this one in videos before, but Spingate at Richmond is maybe the most controversial night in the history of NASCAR. With Martin Truex Jr. needing only a handful of points to make the 2013 chase for the Cup, his MWR teammate Clint Bowyer was ordered to intentionally spin out and cause a yellow flag. Under this yellow flag, another MWR teammate, Brian Vickers, was ordered to come down pit road for seemingly no reason other than to give Martin another point. In the aftermath, NASCAR deemed that Michael Waltrip Racing had manipulated the outcome of both the race and the championship battle, and made the unprecedented decision to boot Martin Truex Jr. out of the chase. Boy, for such a boring track, a lot of controversial things sure seem to happen at Richmond. On top of this already massive black eye, MWR was handed down an incredible $300,000 penalty. And their longtime sponsor Napa Auto Parts also left the team, ultimately leading to Martin Truex being released at year's end and the team going out of business just 2 years later. In a way, the end of MWR mirrors the beginning, as the team got off to a rocky start in the 2007 Daytona 500, with an illegal fuel additive being found in their cars. This prompted NASCAR to fine all the MWR crew chiefs $100,000 and dock Michael Waltrip 100 driver and owner points. With no points to fall back on, Waltrip and his teammates had to qualify their way into the remaining 2007 races on speed, something that they were rarely able to do. With the MWR car suffering numerous DNQs during this season, the team's major sponsors Burger King and Domino's both bailed, and Waltrip was forced to partner with a billionaire just to keep the team afloat. Richard Petty's cheating neatly mantra is unfortunately something that Michael Waltrip's team never learned over their nearly decade-long history. The last absolutely massive penalty handed down by NASCAR came just last year in 2023, when Chase Briscoe's team was handed down an L3 penalty for having a counterfeit part in their car prior to the 2023 Coca-Cola 600. In case you don't know, an L3 penalty is like a nuke going off. It completely ruins your entire season, even if you do manage to win your way into the playoffs. 120 points, 25 playoff points, a 6-race suspension for the crew chief, and a record-setting $250,000 fine. Chase Briscoe would have had to win 5 races this season just to break even with the other playoff competitors. NASCAR had laid down the warning before: do not mess with the next-gen car single-source parts. And after Hendrick and Kaulig got away with the louver controversy earlier in the year, NASCAR was out for blood for the next team that stepped over the line. And unfortunately, it happened to be Stewart-Haas Racing. And now, only 2 years later, with Stewart-Haas Racing shutting down at the end of the year, perhaps this penalty was the beginning of the end. Unlike Petty Enterprises, MWR, or Carl Long though, this penalty likely wasn't the only thing that sank Stewart-Haas. There's at least half a dozen other reasons why this team is shutting down at the end of the year that we already touched on in another video, like Tony Stewart's disinterest, lack of sponsorship, and ongoing charter negotiations with NASCAR. But I can't imagine that this historic penalty helped in any way. So those are the 5 biggest penalties, or at least the ones with the 5 biggest consequences in NASCAR history. Which one do you think was the most severe? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. But don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed, subscribe for more videos just like this one, and check out dailydownforce.com for more awesome NASCAR content.